As you may have noticed, I'm taking a look back at the Star Trek movies in anticipation of the new film, Star Trek Insurrection, opening very soon. And now I come to what I feel is really one of the most underrated films in the Star Trek series, and that is Star Trek Insurrection. I really have never understood the hatred and the venom that is directed at this movie by a lot of Star Trek fans. There are people who talk about this movie as if it is just absolutely horrible, and even members of the cast have expressed their dissatisfaction with this movie. And I just don't understand that. It's not a great movie. It's certainly a step back from First Contact, but it's not a bad movie at all. It's a perfectly fine Star Trek film. And I want to talk a little bit about what I do like about it. There's a sense in Star Trek Insurrection that we don't see or feel in other Star Trek films, and it's a sense of play. It's a sense of playing with the personas of the characters, of playing with audience expectations of the actors and what the actors will do when asked to play their character in a certain situation. And it makes for a very interesting, very unique feeling film. The story about the aliens, the very human-like aliens that live on this planet with special radiation that gives them essentially eternal youth, the Baku. It's the stakes aren't very high. It's not a, the galaxy is on the brink type of story. But that's okay. I mean, that's something that I've heard people criticize it for, that the stakes aren't nearly high enough. But that's perfectly fine with me. I don't need every movie to be about saving humanity or saving the galaxy as we know it. That's perfectly fine for me to have a nice local story involving our characters. And that sense of play is important, I think, to the theme of the movie. I mean, it is a light movie. It is inconsequential. It is basically just sort of a frivolous adventure compared, especially with First Contact, which was presented as a very significant, very important story where the galaxy did hang in the balance. Insurrection is not that. It's a very light story. But even so, there are some interesting things going on in this movie, and a lot of it is tied in with that sense of play that I talk about. Because even though we know who these people are by now, we've seen them in various films, we've seen them for 7 seasons on the television show, Insurrection suggests that they still have some room to grow. They still have some discoveries to make about themselves. And that's always an interesting place to put characters. And we see that with Captain Picard in the way he's presented as a bit silly in the very beginning. There's a diplomatic function on board the Enterprise where the alien ambassador puts this weird sort of headband tassel thing over his bald head that makes him just look utterly ridiculous. We've never really seen Captain Picard in that light before. And then immediately after that, he learns of this crisis with Data on the Baku planet, and he becomes serious, but yet he still has to keep his diplomatic hat on, so he tells Geordi to sort of quietly go tell the chef to skip a course in the meal so he can get the alien party off the ship as quickly as possible without breaching etiquette. You see how Picard is able to sort of balance his responsibilities as a commander and as a warrior with his responsibilities as a diplomat. He doesn't just want to kick the alien guests off the ship. He wants to sort of push them off as quickly as politeness allows. And that's a very interesting facet to Picard that we don't see very often, that we see in Insurrection. And the other major character exploration is with Data, which, as it was in First Contact as well, but in this movie, the exploration of Data is very much tied into this idea of play, and also the idea of the nature of identity, because one of the children in the Baku village sort of befriends Data and talks to him about the importance of being able to play without a structured goal in mind. When he mentions play to Data, Data says, "Oh, I play the violin, I paint, I do all these recreational activities." But he's never played, just sort of freestyled it, just run around outside and climb trees and rolled around in the dirt and just played like kids play. And Data's never really thought about that. The whole catalyst for the plot is Data being injured, and then this program taking over and sort of setting aside his morality sense and turning him into this unthinking sort of fighting machine because he's been injured and he feels threatened, and he just kind of goes into auto fight mode, and that's what brings the Enterprise, and that's what reveals their presence to these aliens in the Baku village, and it's what starts everything in motion. And it raises the question of who Data is. You know, is he just the sum of his programming? Is he just a person who has been programmed to behave in a certain way, and that's all he is? Or is there something more to him? Is there something transcendent about him that can't be quantified in just his programming? And that's an interesting question. I'm not going to argue that the movie is explicitly about that. It doesn't hit that note very hard. But it is definitely there. We see that in the villains as well. The villains of the film, the Sona, these aliens that are jealous of the Baku and want to take their life regenerating abilities for themselves, their identities are very closely tied to this idea of change and transformation. The whole motive behind their plot, behind their action, is to take this life-sustaining radiation so they can use it to heal themselves because they are dying. They have they all seem to have this disorder where their skin is falling off. They have to have themselves stretched and stapled, and they just can't survive much longer, and they need this radiation to help them survive. They need to transform. They need to change in order to sustain themselves. So that's a theme that's all throughout the movie, and it's interesting to me, and it's indicative that there is something else going on other than just a fun romp. Although I admit it is predominantly just a fun romp. These are themes that are present but are not really hammered very hard, but they're there nonetheless to be seen and to be talked about. The performances are good. The performances are not quite as stand out as in First Contact, but that's mostly because the actors aren't given those types of moments very much. There are a few standout moments for the performers in Insurrection. Worf has a nice moment. Worf is sort of going through the Klingon version of puberty as a result of the de-aging radiation on the planet, and he's very aggressive and very short-tempered while he's on the planet, and there's a moment where he's being attacked by these robotic drones that are shooting at everybody, and he runs out of ammo with his phaser, or his phaser gets jammed somehow, and he just cracks one of the drones with the butt of the gun, like he just swings it like a baseball bat and just knocks it out of the fucking sky, and then has this really great, like, wild, excited look on his face when he looks at Captain Picard and goes, "I'm definitely feeling aggressive tendencies, sir." It's just really funny. And then there's the scene at the very beginning where they come to rescue Data, and Worf and Captain Picard are singing along with Data to a song from the HMS Pinafore to distract him. And Michael Dorn as Worf just has some really wonderful, funny moments in this film. And Brent Spiner as Data as well. There's a joke in it that I really laugh at every time. I love it. A lot of Star Trek fans hate it. When Data inflates himself in the lake, he says, "In the event of a water landing, I've been programmed to serve as a flotation device." And he, like a balloon, sort of sprouts out of his ass, and he floats up. I thought it's a funny sight gag. It's well delivered by Brent Spiner. I just think it's funny. Patrick Stewart as Captain Picard has some good moments. Nothing quite like his famous, "I will make them pay for what they've done" monologue in First Contact, but some good scenes nonetheless. And then also another good guest star in this. We had good guest stars in First Contact, and Malcolm McDowell as the guest star villain in Star Trek Generations really almost saves that movie just by the sheer deranged camp of his performance. And in Insurrection we have F. Murray Abraham, one of my very favorite actors, famous for playing Salieri in the film Amadeus, as Ruafo, the villainous leader of the Sona. And like Malcolm McDowell in Generations, F. Murray Abraham in Insurrection is just going for it, is just acting for the fences, is just extraordinary. A huge, hammy, scenery-chewing performance. I mean, Shatner must have watched this performance by F. Murray Abraham and shed a tear. It was just wonderful, a wonderful, campy, cartoonish sort of villain. with a character history that is revealed toward the end, he and his fellow Sona, that ties in with the theme in the movie I was talking about, the theme of transformation and of experimentation and change. Really, really well done. Overall, again, I will defend this movie. I don't think it's a great movie, but I will defend it from the charge of being a bad movie. Star Trek Insurrection is not a bad movie. It's certainly nowhere near as bad as the worst Star Trek movie ever made. Strangely enough, a movie that was made with the intention of improving on Insurrection. People really didn't like Insurrection when it came out. They were very disappointed in it for whatever reason. They felt like the franchise needed to either be wrapped up or rejuvenated. So they brought in some new creative people, a new director, a new screenwriter, to sort of do a combination of a restart and an ending and some other things. And, well, I don't think it worked out that well. It's the next film in the franchise, the next film I'm going to talk about, Star Trek Nemesis, which I will just go ahead and spoil the suspense for you, I think is far and away, by leaps and bounds, miles and miles, the worst Star Trek film yet made. I will talk about that in the next video.